Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christianson. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Hey, Dr. C with you. Welcome back to the Thyroid Beginner Series. Let's talk about diet. This is super important, and this is one of the big pillars towards thyroid recovery. There's a lot of good data saying that your diet can make a big difference in terms of reversing symptoms, improving health, and even reversing full-on thyroid disease. So if you haven't already, please check the last episode about iodine. There's a lot of important concepts there. But the different kinds of diets that have been studied for thyroid disease include gluten-free, autoimmune paleo, vegan, and low iodine. There's a few other odds and ends, but that's pretty much the ones that have had clinical trials done. I'm going to touch on these briefly. So gluten-free diets, there's an overlap between celiac disease and thyroid disease, meaning if you've got one, you've got higher odds of also having the other. And there's been thought that maybe somehow gluten causes thyroid disease. The data is clear that actually gluten doesn't. So those with celiac, whether they avoid gluten or not, they've just got a higher risk of getting thyroid disease. They should avoid gluten, but if they don't, their risk of thyroid disease is not any higher. But a connection is that most foods with gluten are also foods really high in iodine. We'll come back to that. There's also a lot of talk about the autoimmune paleo diet. And, a gluten-free diet, if it's cutting out processed grains, can be a healthier diet. And an autoimmune paleo diet, if it's cutting out processed foods, if it's adding in more vegetables, more protein, there can be some benefits to that. But there's a theory in autoimmune paleo that a lot of plant foods are also dangerous, that plants have things like lectins or oxalates that may be harmful, or compounds from nightshades. And so it causes a pretty severe restriction of plant foods. To date, there have been 2 studies on the autoimmune paleo diet. And the first one showed that there is no change in thyroid function. Now, a lot of people have done it and they feel better. So why is there a disconnect? Again, many people may improve their diet by going autoimmune paleo. They might be raising their protein. They might be cutting down on processed foods. But when that's the one variable, the first study showed thyroid function didn't get better. Now, the second study on autoimmune paleo also looked at their iodine intake. And it saw that many who went autoimmune paleo ended up raising their iodine intake. And what they saw was that everyone who went autoimmune paleo in this study, they had an increase in thyroid autoimmunity. So their thyroid function not only did not get better, but it got worse. And the researchers said, we think this is because they ate more iodine. So that's the thing that matters. With diet, I think it's important to focus in on what really can help and think about dietary change and dietary restriction as a very critical step that you don't want to take too lightly. When you cut big groups and categories of food out of your diet, you greatly create the risk for nutrient deficiencies, but also there's a thing called orthorexia, and that's the harmful psychological spiral of becoming fearful about food. It's a real risk and it's a big deal. So that's important. Now, I touched on iodine in the last one. I'll touch on that a bit more here. Besides iodine, what else in the diet has been shown to affect the thyroid? Well, there's things that can make it worse, but there's honestly nothing else that's been shown to help it. So things that can make the thyroid worse are basically diets that get extreme, especially extremely low-carb diets. So there have been a couple of trials on people on ketogenic diets or extreme low-carb diets that have also monitored thyroid function. And they've shown that, thyroid function gets worse. And here's why. Your thyroid controls how much your body burns fuel. And if you completely cut out one of your macronutrients, whether it's carbs or fats or proteins, your body thinks it's low in fuel, even if it's not. And this is an important paradox. Even if you're consuming more food than you need, even if you're gaining weight, if you cut out one of those macronutrients, your body may have some negative effects of a starvation response. And that can include a shutdown of thyroid function, like even a dramatic one. We also know that diets that are too low in key nutrients can be a problem with thyroid disease. Big ones here include selenium, iron, B12, zinc, vitamin A, molybdenum, magnesium, calcium. So yeah, it's not that you can supercharge your thyroid by loading up on massive amounts of these, but if you're low in these, that makes things worse. So it's important to be on a diet that has a good range of all the macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbs, and all the micronutrients. And there are times to where someone is really low in the micronutrients that diet alone is not enough. And I'll touch on that under the supplements episode. But for most people, the biggest action steps are going to be getting a good balance of macros first and foremost. And the reason that's important is because you need to let your body know that you're not starving. So you always want some healthy fats, some good proteins, and some good carbs. And the big pitfall that's common is getting way too low in carbohydrate. If you cut out a lot of categories of carbohydrate, your body thinks you're starving, and your bowel flora actually does starve. Your bowel flora only feeds on carbohydrate residue. So yeah. And the biggest single action step, though, that's been shown to reverse thyroid disease is iodine regulation. And that's been shown to reverse hypothyroidism, subclinical hypothyroidism, and even overt hypothyroidism. Now, the rates vary per study, but it's between typically 60 to 80% of people can fully reverse by doing that. So what does an iodine-regulated diet look like? Well, it's pretty cool. You've got a lot of options. Fruits and vegetables, with almost no exceptions, are fine. They're not going to have too much iodine. Animal proteins, land animal proteins, so poultry, meats, beef, pork, same story. Lamb, pretty much never going to have excessive iodine, so no worries about them. Whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, same thing. They're not going to have too much. So you've got tons of food options, all the culinary herbs, all the spices you can imagine, barring seaweed, they're all fine. So the things to be mindful of during this stage where you're actively trying to reverse thyroid disease, first and foremost, processed grains. Now, you can actually bake at home. You can cook, you can make whole grains at home. But if you buy grains in the store from American bakeries, they can contain high amounts of iodine. And sometimes you'll see things in the label saying made with iodized dough conditioners. Sometimes you won't, but that doesn't really predict whether or not the product will contain iodine, believe it or not. Then dairy products. So yeah, cow's milk products. This is milk, butter, cream, yogurt, cottage cheese, all that stuff. And here's the thing, these are not foods that are inherently bad. They can totally have a place in a healthy diet. But during the stage of actively reversing thyroid disease, you want to avoid those as well. Next big category would be C vegetables. Now, these are by far the densest source of iodine in the diet. Most people don't eat them in America, but of those who do, they contribute a lot. And during the whole reset stage, there's really no safe amounts. Seafood is a category you also want to think through. And this one is interesting because there's a lot of data arguing that seafood is healthy, that it's good for us in various ways. So I don't like people to abandon it forever. And there's a lot of good freshwater seafood options, and there's some versions of shellfish, things like squid, scallops, boiled shrimp, that have negligible amounts of iodine in most cases. So I'm more a fan of being thoughtful and including it rather than cutting it out completely. One more thing to mention would be egg yolks. Egg whites are fine, low in iodine, and egg yolks, again, healthy foods. They're not things that you should avoid long term. There's tons of health benefits to having them for most people. But during that active reset stage, you want to get low enough. And here's the idea. Your thyroid has had more iodine than it can tolerate trapped inside of it. So to clear out the extra, you want the incoming amounts of iodine to be well below a certain range. You've got to get lower so the extra can clear itself out. The analogy that makes sense to me, you always hear about the one straw that broke the camel's back, right? But think about what happens next. If you take the one straw off, can the camel's back heal with that load on there? That's just one straw less? Of course it can't. But if you unload the camel, and let it walk around with nothing on its back for a while, its back can probably heal and it can carry a load again. And it's the same thing for your thyroid. You've got to really unload it, get to a low enough range, and give it a good chance to heal. So not only is a wide range of foods optional, but it's better. You want to have as many food categories as possible. You want to have protein, the good fats, the good carbs, lots of veggies, lots of fruits, and maintain variety within all of those. Straightforward thing, lots of food options, very easy. The Thyroid Reset Diet gives menu plans, shopping lists, tons of recipes, so it makes it simple. But yeah, diet makes a huge, huge difference. And when you're actively reversing disease, you want to do the maintenance stage. So I broke foods down into red light, yellow light, and green light. And during the reset stage, you're focusing on the green light foods only. Once your thyroid function is healed and it's back to a good place again, well, now you can move on to maintenance. And that means you can add up to 2 servings of yellow light foods per day in your diet with no problem at all. So Thyroid Reset Diet, check that out. But in helping to recover thyroid function, you've got to take diet into account. It can completely make or break things. All right, Dr. C with you. Take great care. We'll talk in really soon. Bye-bye. Hey, Dr. Christianson here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christianson on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.